Hello and welcome to another edition of the Legal Geeks. Here with me, as always, is my partner in geekdom, Josh Gilliland. Hey, Josh, how are you?
Wonderful, Jessica. How you doing?
I'm very good, and as you can see, a little bit more obvious from my shirt than from Josh's shirt. If you understand where Josh's shirt is coming from, you are a hardcore geek. But yes, we are here to discuss Star Trek, and an episode, or not an episode, one of the Star Trek series that doesn't get as much attention as the other series. Specifically, it is, of course, Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Celebrating its 20th
Whoa!
anniversary.
Oh my gosh, I was going to say that makes you feel old, but you know what? That actually makes sense because I'm not going to tell you how old I am now, but looking back, I never really watched Deep Space Nine much, and that's because it was a time in my life when I was going out a lot and not watching a lot of TV. So, but I have seen a few episodes, and I always meant to watch more.
It was it started when I was in high school, and it intersected with high school, college, and, a little bit of law school. And so watching the different seasons actually reminds me of those periods, whether I was at Davis or McGeorge or going to community college, depending on the time frame. So it's an interesting little time capsule for me to watch.
Fun. Well, tell me now, your shirt, what is this no-win scenario that you reference in your T-shirt there?
Well, the no-win scenario in DS9 would be having a Ferengi prenuptial agreement, which, when you think about it, probably just won't end well.
Well, why do you say that? What is in a Ferengi prenuptial agreement?
Well, they were called the Waiver of Property and Profit. So it wasn't just the normal prenuptial agreement that says in the event of death or divorce, the woman, specifically the woman, would not have a property interest in the husband's estate or the husband's earnings or anything like that, which is hardcore, but we have that right now. But it also prohibited women from owning anything on top of that. So it truly would divest them of civil rights and reduce them to second-class citizens.
So I'm taking it the women, again, I vaguely recall what the Ferengi were. I'm taking it that their women were not treated well?
You could say that. You see, they had a very odd belief. 53% of their population was female, and they were not allowed to wear clothes, leave the house, get a job, and they weren't allowed to read either. So they were pretty much used for...
Oh my God.
And when you think about, that in Star Trek, normally everything was like best case scenario as we looked ahead from like the 1960s version, and then to have in the 1990s the version where you had a race that was completely antithetical to everything we believe in, today with like, wow, you really have no idea of equal protection under the law, none whatsoever. And so on one level, it's an interesting allegory to look at. Well, like, that would be very effective.
It's kind of interesting, too. I wonder if Star Trek was inspired at all by Dune. There was a race, and I'm going to butcher the name, the Bene Tlaxu or something, where, again, that was the same sort of thing, where the women actually literally were, it turns out, just breeding stock. And I wonder, I don't know, and they even kind of, you could argue that there may have been some similarities in how they were kind of viewed and seen. So I wonder if Star Trek was inspired by Dune at all.
I don't know. But we'd have to ask Ronald Moore for
I may have to check that out.
So, and all the other producers.
Well, so explain to me.
But they were very interesting.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but explain to me the prenuptial agreement. Like, what is a valid or invalid prenuptial agreement? In case I want to marry Tom Cruise, what do I need to know?
Well, that one would just be a flat-out performance contract. So, that'd probably be a very Marvin relationship. So, but what we would have here, that's a joke. Don't take it seriously. That's a joke. But what we have here is something very, very different when you look at prenuptial agreements. In the western states and the southern states, because of, being part of Mexico and the canons of belief that they had there, the western United States has community property. And the other states have a slightly different system, but community property's grown over the 200 years. Marriage is essentially a contract. It creates ownership rights after marriage for who gets what, and joint ownership, and the community, the profits that are made from the community are split between husband and wife, generally speaking. But that can be modified prior to marriage with a contract. In California, they have to be in writing. So no pillow talk, prenuptial agreements. That's stuff that and that's what they've referred to it as. So you can't, there's no pillow talk. You have to write it down. You should be represented by counsel when you do it. There has to be a full and fair and accurate disclosure of all the assets. And both parties generally are able to make money, sustain a living, or you have somebody with like extreme wealth coming in and you want to balance things out. So in the event of a divorce, you don't have somebody take half, but you also have to draw the line that, the community begins at a certain point in time, and, the spouse that had more money, say in one situation, say if it was the wife, the John Kerry scenario, that, if they divorce, the husband doesn't like take 50%, they'd be entitled to half of what the community earned after the marriage. That's the very high level. You have to be represented by counsel. It has to take time. And if you have, a divorce, and unfortunately there's a lot of divorce in this country, when courts start looking at prenuptial agreements and whether or not they're valid, different states use different terms, but they're all basically very, similar. And if it's going to divest a spouse of everything or provide next to nothing for them for support, they're going to be reviewing it for fairness or providing very close scrutiny to it. So again, depends what state you look at, but they have different phrases for saying we're going to take a full and fair, disclosure of this, and we want to be very, very accurate in what we look at to see if there was anything that makes this invalid.
So applying that to the Deep Space Nine situation, it sounds like the Ferengi would not withhold or the Ferengi agreement would not be able to withstand that scrutiny.
Well, let's think about this. On reducing a woman to property that can't own anything, that we have some serious public policy issues with that, and that in and of itself
yes,
kill it. But when you looked at the DS9 episode, you had a Ferengi marrying a Bajoran who was used to having rights, and she wasn't going to give up her rights. And the tragedy here, in a culture that can travel faster than the speed of light, that has advanced weaponry and advanced science, apparently there weren't a lot of lawyers running around. And if both sides had been represented, you think it's like, and on DS9 they have a tailor, they got a bar, where the law firm. They needed some lawyers running around to take care of this stuff. There's sales. I mean, like, where?
Gosh, I think we need to do our own show someday about lawyers in the future. You never get to see lawyers in the future. We're doing a show.
Rex Vegas, star attorney. So yeah, we can totally have some fun with that. But the issue for them is if they had actually both been represented by counsel, because the Ferengi character had been divorced and wanted to protect what assets he had. And that's a normal thing for somebody to do. The prospective wife didn't want to give up her rights to own property and, wanted marriage to be, about sharing. So if they had drawn the line of one, the wife doesn't get destroyed as a, her civil rights aren't run over completely. And you can say everything post-marriage is part of the community. Everything that, all the latinum that, Rom had prior to marriage, he got to keep in the event of death or divorce or whatever happened. You could have come up with a very normal prenuptial agreement that would have been normal. And they didn't do that. Legally speaking, well, boy gets girl and, there's the happy ending at the end. It's because the male gave up all the money that he had to help war orphans, which is a bad thing, but it's like you didn't need to give up everything. You could have had a nice, normal prenuptial agreement, and everything would have been hunky-dory.
It's better for the show.
Because there were no lawyers in space.
No lawyers in space.
It was better for the show, but again, you watch this, you think they would have been a JAG officer? Where are the lawyers?
You can't handle the truth. See, I'm going to make another Tom Cruise reference.
Exactly. Very, very odd. So, but anyway, that was, so part of it would absolutely not be effective at all. You can't divest somebody of their civil rights. But protecting assets, done with counsel, full and fair accounting so they could review everything, and an understanding of what they were waiving, and it's in writing, and they have a reasonable amount of time to do it. So it's not like you have 1 hour to review everything or else the marriage is off. Like, that's not okay. So, but they could have had a normal, okay, prenuptial agreement.
Wow, look at that.
But that
wouldn't be sci-fi. Again, especially, apparently lawyers are a real buzzkill in sci-fi. We've got to work on that. You never see any lawyers in anything sci-fi.
I'm really hoping S.H.I.E.L.D. has a lawyer in the office because they would need one. I mean, who's going to, hey, do we need a warrant for this? No, kick down the door. I mean, there has to be a place for lawyers in sci-fi. And
basically, there has to be a place for us in the future is what we're saying here. It's an appeal, please. Show us as lawyers that we don't die out as a whole species or something in the next decade.
Well, more about the status of law schools and the number of jobs for attorneys at another point in time. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been fun. It's always fun to talk about Star Trek, even when we're not talking about Spock. Oh, can I do that hand? I can. There we go. All right. Woo! All right. Well, it's been fun, Josh. We will talk again soon.